Incoming chat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome one more time to Incoming Chat, the H2H business communication podcast by LiveChat. It's a mouthful, and we're here to talk about how we communicate with our customers, with us brands, as business, as people. And for that today, we have a very fun subject to touch. And I invited my good old friend. I know, right? No pressure, man. No. Mr. Kareem Hassanien, welcome to the show. I hope I said it right. I always mess it up, but welcome.
That's part of my brand. Part of my brand is having people somewhat say my name close. You know, it's Kareem Hassanien, but it doesn't. You know, it really is just as long as I'm in the room and you have my email correct, then
there we go.
fine.
That works. Yeah. I can see it happening in a late night show. So is it Hassanien? Did I say it right? Did I say it right?
Yeah, I'm trying to go. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm just Kareem, like Madonna. You know what I mean?
And eventually
Reamer.
you'll be just a symbol, like Prince.
Well,
great to have you here, brother. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure, Kareem. We're gonna be talking about comedy, and we're not gonna make you tell jokes unless you have a good one to tell. But otherwise, we're gonna tell about how we communicate. Comedy or humor in marketing. How are the things? By the way, Kareem is going to tell us a little bit more about himself and why am I asking him? Because he's not only a marketer, he's also a stand-up comedian. I've seen some of his comedy around on the internet, and he's funny. But we're not gonna do that today. We're just gonna focus on marketing mostly. So, Kareem, just give us a little idea of what you've been doing lately with your agency as well.
For sure. Well, in terms of why you invited me here today, I'm just that is luck. That I'm like, but for me, I work at I have a content studio here in Toronto, Ontario, so in Canada, and but we work with a lot of brands, multinationals, and help agencies as well. The reason, so Swell, basically in a nutshell, I mean, without being too, pitchy, if we're trying to stay human, but like our whole thing is creating content, how it, in our opinion, it should be for the, the next century and going forward. Actually, how basically all content is created except for in advertising, right? And in our model or in our feeling, a lot of the traditional agency structures were built to reflect the the corporate structures that existed for since the Mad Men era, right? And that's like a vertically integrated kind of system, which for content these days, I mean, that it worked great when media was all en masse, right? When everything was to was going to three, you had print, TV, and radio. So
that was it.
So, I mean, yeah, exactly. And if you could blanket those airwaves that got you you could see growth, you could see ROI, it was easy. But nowadays, there is obviously many, many more platforms. I'm not speaking out of school for that. And the reality is, every other piece of content that you engage with has your producers, your strategists, and your creatives all in the same room, kind of building and shaping what the end result looks like. So that's really kind of how we really started to think about Swell in terms of strategic consumer engagement. So not just adding more content, adding more content noise.
Yep.
It's really honing in on what you guys were speaking about, that human element and how to actually translate that effectively and in the right platforms for the right brand. And that starts with really having a deep, strong understanding of your brand. So I'm not being funny yet, but there's a lot of
I was waiting for the punchline.
That's really kind of the core of what we do. That stems from the fact that I was and still am a commercial director for many years. Worked through I had my production collective. That collective got absorbed into the traditional agency world. Worked for a few large scale traditional agencies, and the thing that I found was that in those systems you had and I kind of was coming in when social was just becoming a major revenue earner, right? We're talking like mid late 2000s, right? So where you're still just getting into some of these new systems, Instagram and all this kind of thing. So for me, what I got tired of is I would, as a producer, and bringing so many different people together to build a creative, but you had your strategy siloed over here, and they send, hey, you need to say this into the creative. So the creative is like this, and then the creative calls up a production company, right? Or me. So, and for me, that separation really, I found, led to a lot of disjointed content and things that did not, I got tired of bringing teams together to watch a piece of content and a lot of client money run through a feed. And to me, that was, it just wasn't the most effective use.
So in a way, you were trying to solve your own problem.
Exactly. And it's, call it, I mean, you can call it vanity or whatever you like. But for me, the traditional agency structures, their incentives are different now. It's based on, awards, right? Like, and if you're a creative, how you move up as a copywriter. I don't think I'm saying anything crazy. Is that you're trying to create award-winning work, and if you're a strategist or an account manager, you're trying to help that client. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and hopefully you're trying to help that client. And then when you get to production, everybody in production, I love working with production teams because they're just trying. Why I think they're sometimes the most pure is because they have to put every single element of everything they do into their job, whether you're lighting, catering, whatever, because that's how you get more work. So I wanted to bring that work ethic into like, this agency and content studio.
So like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And so we kind of bridge this strange gap where we work with publishers as well. So some of the biggest, I'm not sure how much I should or shouldn't name drop, but some big, some content publishers. So, I can speak about the ones that I like. I work with, Screen Rant, the large scale YouTube and social channels, who are kind of publishers, influencers, if you will. They come to us because they have brands that are always trying to engage with their market, and they know how to speak to their audience exactly, and know, they are data driven. They know what like image is going to keep their audience in the right, keep their audience watching the whole way through. And where brands come in, a lot of the time they say, well, we want to engage with this target audience, but we're not sure how our brand message translates to that kind of content. So we kind of help bridge the gap a lot of the time for that. And then on the on the client side, we try to make them think a little bit more like the publisher. So a lot of the time, we work with clients and we'll help them build out their own, it's a strange business model, but we'll help them build out their in-house content looks like, what their brand studio looks like, and help them actually develop their in-house capabilities. And we come in for some of the higher level commercial content and whatever. It's not necessarily only visual, copywriting, whatever. Like we kind of try to elevate at whatever point they're at. So we kind of augment marketing teams, and we're in this strange gray zone where we're kind of content partners and agency, but our whole thing is just having that well-rounded Renaissance man kind of Renaissance man or woman or person, right?
I think you mentioned something. You mentioned something really important there, because when you help companies, and this is something we've seen in the show before too. A lot of companies or founders of companies come here and mention that one of the biggest challenges is to find this voice. Like how, look, we know the person we're selling to, but how shall we talk to them? How do we?
Right.
And that's why I wanted to move a little bit the conversation to the humor of doing this, right? Because there are many ways. I mean, emotion. We know in marketing, emotion is what it sells. You buy an emotion, you justify with logic. It's a very cliche thing to say, but that's how it is. Now, how do we help companies to figure out, well, when is the right time to joke about? Like, if you have a funeral home, will you make a commercial with a joke in it? Which I think
Right.
I seen one not too long ago. But how do you figure that out? Like, what is the right tone? What is the right emotion, and how you stick it in there in your messaging?
Right. So like you mentioned, this is the part and where being a comedian has actually helped me immensely throughout my advertising career because there are a lot of things that you understand as a comedian that have really helped me um, in the copywriting space and concepting space because and how swell works because for us the biggest thing as a comedian that you need to know is you need to have an understanding of your audience and understand when you need to pivot. Like that is key. You have to gauge where your audience is and then respond to that. Otherwise, you know, I'm not going to name names here, but there are a lot of brands that are riffing or just telling the first joke you've heard. Like think of a comedian that, when you see those cringy comics and it feels inauthentic, doesn't feel like it's that person. They're trying to do a Richard Pryor or Carlin, and they just don't have the joke writing or
Yeah, they
the,
don't have
the
the
kind of
street.
natural ability. And that's not to say that can't be helped or can't be fixed. I know a lot of comics that 10 years ago it wasn't a lot of people they're talking to empty rooms, and that's a whole other thing, but it's really about reading the room. So there's kind of three different elements of how comedy or my comedy background has influenced um my career. Is there's that comedy in your personal approach to creative, then there's comedy kind of in your personal approach to strategy, and then in your personal approach to sales. So in terms of sales, that's obvious. It's you wouldn't know it here, but it's easier for me to speak, in the boardroom and pitch and tell people like this is the idea and that storytelling element is very key. But then when you get to creative sometimes, and sometimes when a brand is left to themselves, obviously you're writing as a committee in a lot of situations, and let's be real. Like the average CMO lasts now, what is it? It's something like 24 months, less than that. And your average C-suite, your average CEO, over 80% of Fortune 500 CEOs are over the age of 65, right? So their sense of humor might not, but their target brand might be, like 24 to 40. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
and they'll be
it's like
completely disconnected.
exactly. So sometimes when left to their own devices in terms of how to speak on, especially on social, when they don't engage in the platforms, it's like, I don't know. It's like Judy in accounting telling a joke, right? And that's not I'm not trying to slam Judy,
Sorry, Jim.
right? Like, this isn't an actual person, but like, I'll give you an example. I used to work with a person who like I loved like dearly. She's the sweetest person. But sometimes when she talked to me, I literally could, I didn't have anything else to offer back. And a lot of other types of media are passive, right? A lot of the, TV, print, radio are not as they're not engagement based. It's you kind of absorbing it, right? So, but with a social platform, the person needs to be able to kind of have some sort of response. You want to elicit a response. So when I used to talk to this, when I remember like I loved who the person was. She's very kind, very sweet. But sometimes, I'd be like, "Hey, how are you doing, Jane?" Let's say her name is, right? "How are you doing, Jane?" And she'd go, "Oh, well, my horse just had babies," and that's great. Like, but like, what am I going to say to that? Like, I don't have any horse baby knowledge. You know what I mean? I can't engage with the conversation at all. So all you can kind of say is that's nice and move away from the water cooler. Like, and that's how a lot of brands, they think if you just, hey, this is what I do, people will go, great. But if you can't translate how that affects them and why it means something to them themselves. I mean, humans, we're if this pandemic is showing us anything, we are very focused on ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
We love ourselves.
Right. So you just have to make sure that you have an understanding of who you're speaking to. And that's a big core of like how we approach any piece of content, is you have to understand first who you are speaking to, and then you frame the conversation around that. We're all quite familiar, I guess, with the hero's journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
In storytelling, the traditional, Pixar hero's journey, you have your, and you have your hero, you have the problem, the obstacle, the villain, right? Your antagonist that holds you back from the goals that you want to reach. And, when you're trying to kind of overcome that goal, you usually find some sort of magic resource. That magic resource helps you overcome the obstacle and get to your end goal, right? And the thing is, most times when you're kind of going through that hero's journey with clients, the first thing they'll do is think that they're the hero, right? Which is natural.
Oh, of course.
But you need to position your brand as not the hero, but the special resource. The audience is the hero, right? You're helping them on their story, right? Like on their journey. So you have to frame what the problem is. Maybe they might not even be aware of the problem, but you have to frame the problem and say, this is how you get over this problem, us, right? And that's how you kind of really attract an engagement and kind of a story. And so telling the first joke you've heard, jumping into the room and just saying what everybody else is saying, I mean, that's a great way to get drowned out. And I think there's still the kind of this, even though we've had, social media for, well over a decade and more, you could say a couple decades, depending on who you start with. There's still people who see it as like crossing a threshold into the internet. I still always have clients, God bless them, who kind of come in and say, look, like, we're trying to move online.
Yeah. Digital marketing.
And yeah, and it's like, well, that's a giant world. Like there's so much. There isn't just one thing online. Online is the biggest mass market that there ever has been, but that has also created extreme segmentation. So you have to really understand who and where the people are that you want to speak to are online, and kind of speak to that. I have one more analogy, but if you have another question,
No, bring it up, because I really like the one with the hero's journey. So keep
I like to talk a lot about when I'm talking to brands, I like to say, okay, let's take the R out. Right. So let's think about bands, right? Think about how bands and marketing of bands and how music has changed, right? Because a lot of people connect to music, even if they don't necessarily, because everyone's kind of in their bubble, especially when you're in it doesn't matter the size of your company, that's where you go to work every day. That's the circle you're in. Those are the people that you're in. You are completely embedded in that world. And it's important to get outside of that if you want to connect to an audience. So to me, I would say, look at how bands kind of approach music after, the Napster, streaming, Spotify revolution, right? If you're a big band, if you're a giant band, if you're a giant brand, you have a legacy, you have an image. People know who you are. They're going to listen and hear what the Rolling Stones are because they're the Rolling Stones. They're going to check out what Apple's up to because it's Apple, right? Or whatever. But if you're an emerging band, you're an emerging brand. There, the light went off. That's my joke.
No,
but if you're an emerging band, you have to find your audience. That's the key first. You have to really understand what about your creative, what about your music speaks to the people that are in your audience, and you have to really play to that, right? So you're a punk band, right? I know who I'm talking to. If you're a punk band, the next album's a hip hop album. Sometimes it's going to be hard to kind of keep the same momentum up. We're not necessarily in the days anymore where you can be Paul Simon and just drop an album of just rant, like, you know what I mean? So, if you guys aren't familiar with the Paul Simon catalog, just go back and you'll get my reference. But like,
I will add the link somewhere in the description.
Right. Sure. I don't know what the legalities are. So you have to, otherwise you're just shouting in an already full room, right? You have to figure out what makes your band different. Even bands now, bands start on Instagram a lot these days, or on social channels. They get it, right? So brands need to understand that they are kind of in the same ballpark. You have to really hone in on what your audience is looking for, build that like small audience, and then let that grow over time as friends, or like as that starts to build, and then you'll start to get the momentum going. But if you don't start with that initial audience understanding, then you might as well just be in the crowd listening to the bigger band and just shouting that, do you know about my shoes? Like, it's just, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think that's a problem. A lot of people are speaking to themselves out there, or speaking to the other people in their business, right?
Now that you mentioned that, because I was thinking of what's happening with brands in general. Like, first of all, yeah, you're right. The digital marketing scenario or internet is huge, right? There's hundreds of millions of brands and personal brands and whatever you want to call it. They're all over. Everybody's screaming at the same time. And there is one funny joke that it works on one side, and suddenly everybody's telling the same joke. I mean, it's got to go to Twitter, whatever's trending, it's trends because someone started it, right? And everybody wants to join in. Do you think that comes out of a lack of creativity on doing something, or it's just the pressure for marketers? Like, look, we need to get into this trend, otherwise we're not gonna. Well, if we miss it, we're gonna be in deep trouble.
I mean, I don't think it's a lack of creativity, because I've met, I think the best marketers that I've worked with are, they're incredibly flexible and have, and they can be creative. It's not just, and this is something we push back hard against. It's not just copywriters or people in an agency that are creative. Anybody can have creativity. It's about how you form the creative. So like, it's the same again with comedians. Comedians aren't the only people that can tell jokes, but what they are is people who know how to form jokes and know how to deliver them, right? So that's, to me, it's really about helping form that, what that is going to actually look like or translate like. Sorry, can you give me the question again, just the last part of it?
When you see this wave of everybody repeating the same joke over and over, right?
Yeah, sorry, I remember. So yeah, I mean, the idea of piling on is incredibly, it's tempting. Everyone, trending is a big part of every one of these social media elements, but it's about telling how your story plays into that trend, why you are relevant to that trend. If you're not relevant to that trend, stay out of it. Create your own trend, tell your own story. You don't have to jump on every single bandwagon, because every other brand, every other person is already on that bandwagon and already talking about it. So if you have a natural place to embed yourself in the conversation, do it, but do it from your own perspective, and actually have a perspective from your brand. This is especially true in this last year. Every content strategy for all of my clients, throughout the entire year, we build, months down the road strategies Obviously, in March of last year, they all just went, like, everything just went up in smoke.
Yeah.
Those plans, you can't, and every 2 weeks, I think we forget at the beginning how every like week, was like a year. I mean, it still feels like that in a sense, but I mean, at the beginning it was, we need to talk about COVID. Everybody, how do we approach COVID? How do we talk about it? 2 weeks later, it's like, everybody's sick of this. Everybody's sick of COVID. Everybody's tired. How do we talk about selling again? Naturally. How do we talk about our brand again? Naturally. Then 2 weeks after that, it's what's our like? Do we have a position on Black Lives Matter? What do we say? And how do we seem authentic about it? And that's a real thing that everybody's feeling. And those kinds of movements also, you have to have a very deft touch, otherwise you are in big trouble, right? If you don't show genuine empathy, if you don't show genuine a genuine honest reaction from your perspective, then it's just going to go either as noise, or even worse, it could really severely damage your brand. So the key to it, that we've both been talking about, is just being human, right? Is just being real. Think about how, and the thing that stops, I think, some of that conversation in a lot of situations is because not necessarily that everybody wants to be safe, and there's so many people at every table saying we should approach it this way. You end up not actually saying anything at all, or not saying anything that has a discerning point. It's all just kind of it's all worn down to the nub. So to me, you really have to tell the story from your point of view, from the world that you're in. Everyone is kind of in their own bubble, and you have to speak and understand you're in that bubble, and understanding that you are in that space, and that other people are in other spaces. So again, I keep coming back to this, but your understanding of yourself. So that's a big thing. Being able to identify, self-reflect, and know who you are, which that's difficult in its first place. And then understanding who you're talking to, just like I'm talking to you right now. I'm aware that I'm talking to you, and so I would talk to, I'm talking to Marcos, but I also know that oh my God, there's people listening, right? So it's like,
I'm sure the tone will be different, which is just you and I. But
yeah, I'm way less funny right now than I thought I would be initially.
No. I didn't invite you to tell jokes. I didn't invite you to tell jokes.
The only person I've ripped on is Katie in accounting, or whatever I called her. Yeah.
What I wanted to take from what you just said, especially from the point of view of an agency, or from a creative, or from a marketer, you do this homework, right? You do the homework of, look, I need to understand the brand. The brand is like this, our customer is like that, and this is how these two entities would talk. But sometimes you get external forces, and I wanted to ask you, as an agency, did you ever sit down and say, Kareem, this is our brand. We sell shoes, and we want you to make something funny to sell our shoes, or something sad to sell our shoes.
Yeah.
Do you get requests like that? Just like, look, sell our shoes this way, please.
I think every marketer gets that. I mean, even further than that, it's like, it's not just, a brief is going to be, yeah, we want you to sell our shoes and they will try to push the direct. I get it as specific as, we want you to sell our shoes. I don't currently actually work with a shoe brand. So if there's any out there, holler at me. We work with a lot of CPGs and fashion, but no shoes yet. So anyways, so I'm going to stick with shoes, but we'll get we want to have humor, because that's our brand. We want you to talk about shoes, but we also want it to be on an Instagram video that's going to go viral. We're not going to put paid behind it, and we're going to do, and then we want this to somehow drive people to our website. And then when they get to our website, they're going to sign up for our newsletter. You know what I mean? That's the problem. Everyone, so many marketers, they try to fit too much into every little piece of content, instead of, you can have 10 pieces of content for the same investment in a lot of situations, in different ways, that all have the same theme that can drive to very specific strategies. And so when you try to fit too many CTAs, too many elements into the creative, then your creatives are already in a box, and they can only go so far. So to me, what I tell my clients, and the amount of times I've done this to the detriment of my bottom line, I'll be like, I understand, and I would love to just do that that one TV spot.
Yeah.
Right. Or like, I have an example of like, a client who, very dead set on out of home, right? During and print during the pandemic. And we're like, well, print is down everywhere. So maybe you'll get more bang for your buck out of it. And then an out of home, nobody's out of their home. Like, why are we driving? People aren't
why
driving
spending
past
billboards?
Why are we, instead you could do you could take that money and push your social further, or you can take that money and do a bigger TV media buy. So really, but sometimes, again, from like people who've gone through 30 years of marketing, it's really hard to tell them that, like, okay, this blanket media strategies are not going to be as effective anymore. You're going to burn a lot of money, where instead you can really focus in that money on doing something that that's actually going to get you a return on investment. So and it's hard. That's always a difficult conversation to have. I always say I spend almost as much time, probably more time, convincing folks to not spend their money as I do to get them to spend it. I go, I like to tell them, like, hey, you can do this.
Do more, yeah.
10. There's no just one way anymore, and that is also tough. Marketer, a CMO has a limited amount of time to really show that their work is going to further the company, right? With a CFO, and like I said, the average CMO is under 2 years, right? So they have a short window to really show that they can provide growth. And a lot of the time, it's a difficult conversation to kind of go in there and say, well, you need to build you have to do A, B, and C, and then this growth will take, a certain amount of time, and in this platform, and then you start investing into this platform, and then you start like building a whole strategy. And that's why there's so many, in my opinion, again, there's a lot of one-click marketing strategies out there that are more than willing to, and more than, some of the best salespeople are marketers. And so it's like, buy my course, buy my thing, and then click on this one thing, AI, magic words, and all of a sudden you'll have, your Fortune 500 company will be into the stratosphere. But for me, it's just not. It's not. You have to invest in the work, and you don't have to do all the work yourself. But somebody's got to do that work. Somebody has to understand who that audience is, and somebody has to understand how to speak to them naturally. And if that's, if that's not you,
someone else is going to do it.
Somebody's going to do it. Somebody is going to do it somewhere along the line, right? So that strategy needs to be kind of first and foremost. Otherwise, yeah, again, you're speaking to yourself.
Now, that's a very ethic approach in general, right? I mean, there's more than ethic; it's just the right approach. That's how you should do things when you know what you're talking about. But at the same time, you see brands taking a different stance of like, we're just gonna make a lot of noise, very loud. We're just gonna do something outrageous, and let's see how it goes. Like, how do you feel with just especially agencies thinking like, oh, they're paying us $1 million, just we're just gonna put a naked fat guy on top of a building with a sign of, and I don't know. That's the first thing that came out of my mind.
I would advise them against that.
Probably. But you know what I mean? It's like they will
Totally.
they will do something like that. They just make a lot of noise, and I mean, the brands that work like that, and the strategy works. Like when you go and see Wendy's Twitter, I find it hilarious the way they treat any subject in such a funny way. They will dump on McDonald's or whatever with no bad consequences. Totally the opposite. They create this voice, right? But do you think it's an easy escape, or you should, or it could be a strategy behind those things, like taking it to the extreme level?
No, because I mean, like, so it depends how you define making noise. So if the way you see that is having an extremely aggressive media buy in one market and having this, outlandish ad, I mean, that's fine, but there's always going to be somebody, and there's always going to be a brand that's bigger that has a bigger media buy, and there's always going to be if you're a brand, you're not competing just with other brands anymore. It's not McDonald's versus Burger King. It's McDonald's versus Netflix versus any other piece of digital content that is fighting for attention these days. So again, you have to make it organic to where people's attention are, and like chasing vanity metrics to grow engagement. I mean, is in a lot of senses. I mean, I get why it's tricky for a marketer, because they need to be able to show something. You need to have something in a chart that you can show your CFO and say, look, here's a pie chart, or here is a like a growth chart, like so it's, if you're chasing vanity metrics, that's fine, but and if you're paying for views, great, but does that mean that those people will convert, right? Is that going to actually get you the growth, engagement, and have people kind of coming back and understand? There's a lot of times, like I've done a lot of videos with clients that have been, and again, this goes back to what I was saying about award-winning campaigns. I've worked on some great, really, really powerful, really effective campaigns, and been very blessed to do so. But I've definitely also watched that after that campaign goes, that campaign is over, and then that brand, nobody like, it didn't really translate down the line. It was going back to my story about brands. There's a lot of one-hit wonders, and bands, right? There's a lot of people who can do one thing big, and that's great. But what benefit does that give you from a sales strategy over time? You want to have ongoing engagement and you want to be top of mind. And I mean, every marketer has been trying to be top of mind of a consumer for, the longevity of that consumer's life. So to do that, you have to actually build some sort of rapport with that consumer. So it's, I mean, there's the thing is, there's hundreds of ways to do any specific like piece. There's not just one way, and and being up to date and on top of what platforms are doing is a huge part of that these days. And your average marketer, just it's when you're embedded in a company, you have so many things that you got to deal with first, right? Before, like, that you're dealing with your internal politics. You're dealing with, you might have most large scale brands these days have, one agency that's and that does your print, that's trying to also get your digital, and one that's doing your digital that's also trying to get your, TV buys, and one that does your so you have a million people telling you giving you different directions, trying to say different things that are going to increase your revenue. So it's really, it's hard for them to understand who to listen to and how to actually quantify that return on investment, right? Like there's your ROI, and then also to quantify your return on engagement. That's not something yet you get immediately.
That's very true. That's very true. And one, if you have to, because we're gonna have to wrap up because our cameras are getting hot.
Right.
But if we have to give an advice to, there's a small startup right here that they get a big investment, and the venture capital say you need to spend $1 million in marketing, and they call you, so Kareem, we need help. What shall we do? Where shall we put our money? Like what will be the best, or what you think it will be the best for them to do? Well, I know it's not a lot of money, to be honest. I mean, right now, marketing. Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, sure. But $1 million can do a lot, right? And if, and any agency, there's a lot of people out there that'll be like, $1 million. Yes, give me $1 million, and your company will be awesome. It will be amazing.
We'll spend it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a really good question and a really interesting question, and I'm going to, again, not really give you an answer. So I'm going to say, so you're the first thing I always say or always do is, like, you have to have some sort of consumer analysis, right? First and foremost, know who you are talking to. I've said it 100 times during this podcast. You have to, so I would really get a strong handle on that, and there's a million different ways you can do that. I mean, we've worked with alcohol brands, and we've gotten to the point where I'm standing with a clipboard inside of a liquor store going, okay, why are they buying that specific vodka, as opposed to the other one, until they kick me out of the store, which is fine, because at least I was able to grab some bottles on the way out. So, so that consumer analysis, I think, has to really be first. Then understanding kind of where those people are, and then when you're there, it's about speaking to them in a way that's natural for who you are, right? So I know I'm kind of repeating, but I think these things have to be top of mind. You're always, again, going back to comedy, you're always trying, it's not just a comedian who's funny and then the audience shows up. As a comedian, you're actually always trying to get in front of the right audience, right? You do your kind of analysis on what clubs and what places are the best ones, and you're trying to audition for those ones. It's great to do well at Jimmy G's bar, but you want to get, that like the audiences that are there to laugh are at comedy clubs, so you're always auditioning for clubs and for so it's kind of the same thing with brands. You kind of want to start where a receptive audience for you would be, then you kind of use those and you use that as your playground. You're testing, right? You're testing your messaging, right? As you're a comic, right? You're saying, okay, and you're always kind of writing along the way and honing your message, right? So as a comedian, you start out and you write a joke, and that joke has a lot of fat on it, always, right? And the only way it's like writing a song, but you can only write it by playing it and performing it in front of people. So you go and you perform that bit and you see, okay, this worked, this didn't. Let's chop some of that fat and we'll do it again. Then you do it again, and then you do it again until that joke is just humming. It's just perfect, right? And you've got it like exactly kind of honed down to where you want it. That's when you go to the big. That's when you go to the big media buy. That's when you go to the big audience. That's when you go to, okay, this message is so perfected and this joke is so hot. I know it's going to kill.
It's going to work.
And then, and I think, a lot more brands should kind of start to, and will, and have. And I mean, I feel like I've been, kind of speaking negatively in general, but I mean, I'm very lucky with a lot of, a lot of the brands that I tend to attract as well and work with. They're looking to change their messaging up. They're looking to build a smarter, stronger strategy, and they realize that they're getting less and less return on the things that they have done before, and that their TV spot just being put on Instagram or being put on Facebook, whatever, isn't doing anything for them anymore, right? So that's where. So I tend to get a lot of brands that already understand that, and so that helps. Having that awareness helps, but that awareness is still quite, it's hard to come by.
That's true. I think I would love to resume that last the last bit that we were talking on. Like, you need to absolutely know who are you talking to, who are you selling to, but you also need to know who you are and what kind of brand you become, so you can figure out and cut the fat out of what you want to say in order to get the other side to receive it well. And I mean, just to sort of close the today's episode is I love the way that we went through. We're going to have a live chat into a very deep masterclass of marketing. And even though we talk about things that maybe they're very common, they need to be said over and over, because if people don't get it right, like, stop spending your money on random stuff, because it's not about how much you spend. It's about what do you really end up passing through the other side. Like, what is that little message or that little joke or whatever it is that you want to say that is clean enough to reach the other side with properly, with the right delivery, which I think it definitely connects with what you were saying about comedy. Kareem, we could be talking about this for hours for sure.
I feel like I haven't talked about anything yet.
I know, no, like
literally nothing on my list. But I'm so grateful to have had this conversation. I've been fleshing it out. I hope it hasn't been like, I don't know how it's been on your side, but like I feel like, and I think it's important for marketers in general, I feel like I've been still figuring this out kind of as we go, and I think that's important.
Yeah, that's true.
You always have to be pivoting. You always have to be shifting, and you always have to try and be ahead of where that's why I called my company Swell, because I always felt like I've always been just ahead of where the wave is going to be. And once the wave gets there, you're overcome.
But you're also flexible.
You have to be flexible.
Exactly.
You have to, if you've ever seen a surfer, they are fit. They are fit.
I've seen some of those. Brother, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody at home, for watching. I hope you learned something today. And if you did, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel, which we're celebrating with you today, because we're recording this today, the day that we reach 1,000 subscribers. Actually, we passed 1,000 subscribers already on our channel. So we're happy that we're delivering. Thank you very much, sir.
What an anticlimactic way to celebrate. No,
don't worry.
No, I'm just kidding. Congratulations. There's a lot of value out of the work that live chat and success, that Success Live Chat's doing. So thank you so much for letting me even be, a part of this and sharing some of my random philosophies across my random different multiple careers that I've had. So
thank you for joining, because for sure it was a masterclass.
Can we charge for this?
Sorry, too late. All right, thank you very much for everybody for thank you, brother, and thank you everybody for watching. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Good luck out there.
Incoming chat.